All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here after the floor on Thursday, April 6th, and we're continuing testimony for the next little bit on S100. We have Maura Collins with us today, Executive Director of VHFA, and then we'll be followed up by Doug Hoffer, who's the State Auditor, and then Mike DeRocher, who's the Director of the Division of Fire Safety. And then after that, we will have more conversation with Damien on S103 to finish the walkthrough on that. Maura, welcome back. We've had a walkthrough of the bill. We focused on the housing portions of the bill, which have been sections 25 or 26 and beyond yesterday. Many of them, sections were deleted. And so there's a few things that obviously we're considering over time, which is what sections, at least the policy portions of them, do we re-include? What sections do we want to include from our wall? But you had some specific testimony on, I believe, the middle income program. And so we will just pass the microphone over to you, and welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again. Hope that means I passed muster the first few times. I'm Maura Collins. I'm with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And yes, I think I'm here to talk about the three different programs that were in S100 that had appropriations, where VHFA was the administrator. Some of these, and I'm going to explain which ones are what, were also included in the budget. Some are not included in the budget. Some are part of the BAA, the budget adjustment. And so I'll explain to you where things stand, because I haven't watched all the testimony, but I understand that there's some questions. So I'm going to walk all through that. And I promise by the end, I'm going to address the priority housing projects. I think Representative Elder had a question about what qualifies in different programs. So I'm going to touch on that. You have already heard my spiel about this picture. You may remember I was here talking about the rental revolving loan fund, and I showed you this picture of a 9-unit building in Fairleigh and being built by Village Ventures. I'm going to skip over that. Sorry, I'm using the same slide deck as I used yesterday in another committee. They had questions about how much housing do we need. And I want to talk about the Missing Middle Homeownership Development Program. This is a homeownership program, no rental. We're building starter homes, modest homes, affordable homes. And it was launched last year with a $15 million investment. And then on the next slide, I'll tell you that in the BAA, you all just approved another $9 million. Because actually, let me skip to the next slide. Because what happened was you gave us 15 million last year. We opened up for applications, told people about the program all summer long, because, you may not pass things until May, but we are listening. We do know what's coming. And so we had been vetting a program guide with developers through the development of this program. And so all through the summer, while the state was wrangling over how could ARPA be an eligible source of this program, we were busy working with developers on how to make sure that we had thought through all the aspects of this new program. So by the time we opened up by the time we got a signed grant agreement with the state, which was, I think, end of November, we opened up for applications for December and January. And within 8 weeks, we got applications for about $24 million of developments. 17 different organizations looking to build 140 some odd homes with about 300 bedrooms in 15 towns across 9 counties. And so that was what we knew by the end of January. When we were asked how the program was going by the legislature early in the session, they quickly said, you know what, it looks like you need another $9 million to fund all the applications that you've received. And so we're very grateful for that. And so at our March board meeting, the governor had not yet signed the BAA. And so we just awarded the first 15 million worth. And you can see where they were. I'd be happy to answer questions about the developments that were funded. But we weren't able to fully fund the applications that we got. Many of these, what you see here, they applied for more homes than what we funded. And we had to give a lot of these projects a little bit of a haircut and actually not fund a development in Chittenden County altogether because we just didn't have enough money. And so we anticipate that at our May board meeting, that's a typo on the screen. It says award additional 8 million. It should be 9 million. And we will be taking action there. And so this program was from last year. It was not in the governor's budget. And so it was not in what the House appropriations originally looked at. It was put into S100, which is why I'm here today, for $20 million. It passed both the Senate Housing Committee and Senate Natural Resources. And then as I think always happens, or lots of times happens, it seems, the Senate appropriations, when it came to them, they stripped out all the funding from the program. They're going to deal with that as a part of the budget. And I was testifying in Senate appropriations yesterday about that. But again, this program was not in the House passed budget for FY24. So this is something that now is, discussions are starting on the Senate side. As a reminder about what the program is, and then I'll stop talking, this program is a program for builders and developers who are going to build or acquire and rehab homes, for sale homes, for folks earning about 120% of median income. 1/3 of the money has to go to shared equity homes, and the rest goes to cover two different things. The appraisal gap, which is if it costs this much to build a home, and the minute that home gets appraised, once it's built, it doesn't appraise for as much as it costs to actually build it. That's an appraisal gap, and it would cover that amount. In addition, let's say that house now is appraising for $400-something thousand, but that's not affordable. And a builder wants to have it sell for $350,000 because that's more affordable. Then that's what we would call an affordability investment. And that buying down of the home price and making the home more affordable, that is a permanent investment in that home. We have a land covenant on that. And so anyone who buys one of these homes, they are agreeing when they purchase it that someday they will not sell it for more than the appraised value, which not everyone wants to sign up for that kind of thing, especially lately, but that they will get an appraisal. They will not sell it for more than the appraisal, and they will sell it for whatever that affordability investment was, that much less. So if someday the home is worth $400,000, but we had put $50,000 of public resources into it, that first home buyer doesn't get to walk away with $50,000. That $50,000 stays with the home, and it is sold to the next household for the appraised value minus that $50,000. And that's how we make the home somewhat more affordable for households.
Dennis.
So just for clarification, so when you do the appraisal, is it at the beginning of the loan, if you will? Not like 15 years from now, they do another appraisal?
We do both. So to figure out how much is the appraisal gap, there would be an appraisal when the home is first built, and we'd find out what that is.
Okay.
And then let's say I buy that home and I live there for 15 years. I'm agreeing that when I go to sell someday, I will get an appraisal and I will look at that amount. I'll turn to VHFA and say, I just got this home, missing middle home appraised. It was $400,000, but y'all let me buy it for $50,000 less. I agree. I'll sell it for $350,000 in the future.
Okay.
And then the next person buys it. Same thing. They live there how long they live there, and we repeat the process. And so VHFA remains the administrator of the program over time.
Thank you.
Representative Elderman Burrows.
This is just for single family homes, or is this like townhouses?
Townhomes, condos, and
So it
we
can be
funded all those.
duplexes.
Yep,
So
up
when
to 4 units.
up to 4 units, And so when we see, I think it was in the last page, like 140 applications for what, 290 something, 280 something? What was it? 297 bedrooms. So when we talk about that's between 2 and 3 bedrooms, closer to 2 bedrooms per
But we saw
home.
both. Yep, and I could even get you, of the projects we've already awarded, we know the bedrooms, there was a lot of 2, 3s. There were some 4-bedroom homes. There were a lot of Habitat for Humanity chapters.
So there, I guess what I'm getting at is how many, sometimes there's more than one home per building, right? So when you say 141 homes, if one of them was a 4-unit,
I kind of, it's 4 homes.
that's 4 homes with up to, 8 or 10 bedrooms.
Yeah, I would probably use the word like structures, and I have no idea how many structures there are. Some of these are, like a condo counts, so there could be a condo complex, which I don't remember if any of these are that kind of complex, but like you could have a 10-unit condo, and I would count that as 10 homes, 10 units,
Right.
even though it is one
I'd be interested to
structure.
know how many of them are over, say, 4 units.
Memory is telling me not many,
Not
if
many.
any at all.
Yeah, probably, I would think a lot of them
Memory
are in
is
that
telling me
4 and
that it was a
less.
few townhomes in there with like 3 units, but again, 9 of them were, like a single family or duplexes that Habitat chapters
Yep.
were doing. Really, a lot of these were some, the Woodstock are duplexes, Randolph is a duplex, but we're going off memory and.
Ridge is a condo.
Yes, thank you. Bay Ridge in Shelburne is one of the larger ones, and
Yeah.
that is a fewer number of buildings, multifamily buildings,
Yeah.
but we're going off more as memory and we should all be
No,
nervous.
that's fine. No, that's good. I mean, I was, that fits with, I'm looking for ballpark
Yep,
trends here.
yep.
On your next page, I had a question on it. So now you can use the appraisal gap or the affordability investment, either way, to get to a max of 35%. I would guess that you're gonna start moving away from the appraisal gap, given the direction that appraisals are going. Is that a safe assumption that, for example, like the appraisal gap 5 years ago, actually in some ways could even be higher than it is now, because while the cost of construction's gone up, comps and just appraisals were very stubborn in Vermont. Even if you spent 600,000 on a house, it could appraise for 3 or 350. I would think that gap is smaller now, because though it might cost 7 or 750, it's going to be worth like 650. You're going to get comparables for that. Like, do you think that's true, that this trend will it doesn't really matter how you get to 35%. I'm just kind of thinking the trend is probably that appraisals are moving closer to the cost of construction.
I think you're right. I have the number of the appraisal gap versus the affordability investment for all the projects that we funded, but I'll also say that math only happens once in this process.
Right.
This is just when the homes are built. They're going to be built in the next year. So kind of where things were years ago, it's interesting and stuff like that, but it's not like we are going to have to keep investing in an appraisal gap, because there's only one cost to build. And so this is only a math that gets done at the outset of
Right.
constructing the home. And in the future, there's no math being done. It's just how much did we invest as an affordability investment? Take that off the sales price so that investment stays permanently with the home and doesn't get
Right.
taken out as equity.
I mean, the upshot that I was kind of imagining is that at that beginning, if the appraisal gap was less utilized, because there's less difference there, and it really skews things towards the affordability investment, it seems to me that the affordability investment has a component which is really up to the developer, which is to set a price that's affordable. Whereas in the other method, it's really being appraised by a third party, and it's a little bit, it just seems like there's less of a role to play for the developer themselves to set that discount.
Yep. And there is some control here, but let's also remember that there's income limits. And so they have some control over that depth of that affordability investment, but they also need to have income eligible households. So in some ways, they're modeling what is going to be needed there.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So the idea here, I mean, this has similarities to the so-called standard shared equity program, where there's key differences, but when it comes to, when you say $50,000, I know you're just using the example, but if there's no appraisal gap for the builder, what happens then? They may have started this process of applying through this program, and then at the end of the bill, they're like, well, actually, it came out to be exactly what we thought it was going to be, so there's no gap. What then happens to the investment?
If there's no appraisal gap, then they could put up to 35% of the cost to build could go right into the affordability investment, and it's lowering the price of the home that much more for the buyers. And so they're able to reach lower income buyers in that situation.
Or they can pull it out and just make it a market home, right? I mean, if they're not using our money, your money, then they could conceivably not sign the anticipated contract, or do they have to follow through with the affordability investment?
If we're promising them this program and equity up front, even if they're not taking it, but the promise of that is probably a way that they're getting other loans and things like that. So no, they're following through at that point. Again, most of our applications are through nonprofits like Habitat chapters and our regional nonprofit network. And so that hasn't been a risk that I've been that worried about, but there are some private for-profit builders who are hoping to participate in this program and have been awarded, and they would then be following through with this because it's been a part of their whole financing package and design of the program. And what we're seeing is that some of these are a few homes in a much larger development. And so they have, a couple missing middle homes, and then they're also doing market rate housing. Because there's not enough, I appreciate all the money, but there's not enough money to build a lot of whole developments. It's just buying a few affordable units within larger developments and communities.
And just one more question for me before I think Representative Burrows, did you have a question? So with the affordability investment, when you say that I can't sell the house, or I'm agreeing to sell the house for the appraised value, it's the appraised value at the time of sale. And appraised value is equal to what's considered market value because at the time of sale, part of your process is to get an appraisal. It's not the assessment, it's the appraisal.
Correct.
Just want to be clear that the appraisal is the equivalent of the sale price, because that's what the banks are going to do in the 6 weeks between you sign your contract.
Exactly.
Okay. Representative Burrows and Chestnut Tangiman.
Thank you. What percent, I'm looking at your goal, your stated goal, and I wondered what percent are rehabs?
That's a good question. Hold on one second. Well, St. Johnsbury property is an existing property. It's a convent that they're looking to redevelop. Middlebury is new construction. Shelburne is new construction. Randolph's new construction. Sorry, I have to do this way. Woodstock's new construction. The Habitat chapters, the Burlington couple units is rehab, and then at least one of the Habitat homes is a tear down because it's uninhabitable, no value, and then it will be a new construction at that point.
Okay, and do you provide guidance for home buyers on, so they can, like if they had how to buy a home that is not way out of reach, that you wind up underwater with?
So we support that to be done through the HUD-approved counselors in the state. There's 5 homeownership centers that serve every corner of the state. That's very unusual. I just want to point out most states, my peers, they are like, wait, every town in Vermont gets covered by a homeownership center? It's like, yes, they do. And so we sponsor and pay the homeownership centers to do that work, and they are embedded in communities and we put on home buyer fairs to promote VHFA's lending products, but that's different than pre-purchase education, and those are HUD-approved counselors throughout the state, part of the NeighborWorks network, and they do that kind of education. They also offer other financial literacy, and then they also offer some post-purchase education and counseling. And in addition, VHFA is now sponsoring financial literacy, which largely has been done by the community action agencies. Obviously they talk about homeownership, but really the homeownership centers talk about home buying education. The community action agencies focus on general financial literacy. BHFA has just started sponsoring organization that is a BIPOC-led organization that's going to start doing statewide financial literacy targeting and focusing on people of color, and talking about just general financial literacy, which also will include some homebuyer education.
I've got one last question.
I'll keep my answer shorter, sorry.
It's still in the same vein. What happens to when a buyer purchases one of these homes and then it's foreclosed upon?
Good question. They are protected. And so, let me think, I haven't had this question since last year. And it's going to take me a second. So when that happens, I'm thinking more that this is, we want this to be subordinate in all ways, and this isn't a loan program, so it can be foreclosed upon because we want folks to be able to get a regular mortgage that can be saleable to Freddie and Fannie. And so in that way, there's no reason that they could not be foreclosed upon. And so should that happen, we would lose that permanent investment in that home because we would not be in first position in that way. Additionally, I would hope that maybe we would get involved so that we could enable some kind of short sale. And in that way, we also may lose less of the affordability investment if there had to be a loss. But in those situations that a homeowner is underwater, they would not have to repay the public resource and harm themselves in that way. The public money would take the loss.
Okay, thank you.
I think you answered my question already, so we can move on.
Right, so this is the home ownership program that, at least in our budget memo, we asked that this be included. It was not, I believe, the rental, the 20 million or so for 15 or $20 million for 15 for VHIP and then 20 for the rental revolving loan fund was approved by us, or we requested that in the budget. So right now, the home ownership program does not have a second year.
Correct.
We have the text in S100, I believe, for, I can't remember if it's for the rental program or for this
For
program.
both. So the three programs I'm going to talk about here we're all in S100 and that.
Key verb.
What?
were.
I know. But so the language was in there and so you're right. After we award the BAA money, which again, this is a typo, it should be 9 million next month or so, this program will cease to exist. We won't have a homeownership program through this.
So the money that we had put in, did we put any of it in whatever number the big bill is, what, 472? Or are we all talking about 145, like BAA money here?
No, it's, when we did the last budget letter we did was for the big bill.
That was for the big bill.
And we had approved, among many other things, we had approved $20 million for this program and the 15 or 20 that was requested for the rental, or 20 million was requested for the rental program to be that revolving loan fund.
Right.
And then we had done $20 million for this among other things. But because this did not appear in, at least on first blush, because this did not appear in the governor's budget request, was it overlooked? Was it, I have no idea, and we didn't get any clear indication why it wasn't in the original budget request, but we put it in our budget memo, and the bill we voted out of the House did not have this $20 million in it.
Did not have it.
Correct. I tried. Shall I move on to the rental
Yep.
RLF, the revolving loan fund? I've already done a presentation on this, so I'm going to be probably quick on it, but I'm very happy to answer questions because it's a brand new program and so it's new. This was in the governor's budget for 20 million. It's also was in S100 for 20 million. And I should have pointed out that both the missing middle and this rental RLF, I'm going to keep saying that, rental revolving loan fund, are both in the rural caucuses housing bill, but although one of the programs is for 15 million, not 20. But my point is that this program in particular has real interest by our rural legislators because it's a program that was designed really focusing on small developments where developers, like the picture from the beginning of my slideshow, are building less than 10 units and applying for the heavy tax credits that we administer. Great program, but the feds don't make it easy for people to access it nor live with it compliance-wise long-term. And so this is designed to be for smaller builders who are looking to build some affordable housing, but maybe not come with the heft of that depth of affordability. This came from the economic development folks. This was employers who started going on their own and building their own housing because they didn't have enough housing for their workforce. We worked with those smaller builders and designed a program to create this permanent revolving loan fund. I know I'm skipping a bullet, but I'm going to jump down here first and pop back. How this works, as a reminder, is that it costs a lot to build. The developer is going to put in some of their own money to their own equity. And then looking at the expected rents, the developer would get approved for some kind of loan from a bank that would be, in my lending language, that'd be in first position. That'd be the primary loan on this building. But there may be a gap because it costs so much to build that they can't get a loan for enough. This program would cover that gap. Again, limited to 35% of the total development cost, or in this case, we have a per unit limit, and that's what I skipped over here. You can see the third bullet is saying that how much you can get through this program is the lesser of 35% of what it costs to build it, the development cost, or S100 put in these limits of 100,000 per unit for more moderate income rents versus 150, a deeper subsidy for the really affordable rents. So as you can see, there's two designations of units that would be identified by a developer. And so they may target households earning between 65 and 80% of median, and they can get a little more money for those units, or they may choose the higher income band. The governor's proposal and VHFA came into the legislature with a cap of 120% area median income. That's a number that we're very used to using as a cap in general. It was the Senate and strongly supported by the Vermont Chamber that bumped that up to 150% of median because they were feeling like for couples or for 2 or more person households, that 120% of median did not bring the incomes up to the level that was needed. And I think that's what Sean Tester, the CEO of Northeast
Regional Hospital.
Regional, thank you. It's always regional, I skip, hospital, was testifying to. And so this is a program that's designed to serve those incomes just over the traditional affordable rental housing programs, which are usually cap out around 60 or 80% median. This is in alignment with what we did with the housing bond a few years ago, when a quarter of those resources had to target households earning between 80 and 120% of median. And in this program, as a reminder, you can pair traditional affordable resources with this program or market rate and not have it be all the units. So what you get for this is a great loan, a lower interest rate. Right now, interest rates are in the 6% for commercial buildings. And if you have 5% of your budget being paid for by the municipality or an employer, maybe you'll get down as far as a 0% loan, maybe interest only. But the affordability restrictions on these apartments are limited to the term of the loan plus 3 years. So if you have a 30-year loan, that means that you have to have it be affordable housing for 33 years. If you do that, but then interest rates change and you pay off that loan after 10 years, then the affordability restrictions are going to expire 3 years later. And during that time, we have rent caps of 3% a year and 3% increases. Rent caps of the increase can't be more than 3%. And VHFA is income certifying the households at move-in.
So that brings us to my priority question,
Mhm.
priority housing question. That would seem like maybe it wouldn't meet the categories for priority housing because there's not a guaranteed 15 years if they pay it off early. Is that an issue?
In my experience, priority housing projects, there's never a guarantee of anything, and I don't know if you want to hear that, but so when
Really
you
just
get
by the- by
certified.
rule, really.
I know, and so when developers say, I'm a priority housing project, it totally passes straight face when that is again, traditional, affordable housing program where you've signed up for affordability in perpetuity, or you've signed up for a HUD contract of 30 years or something like that. For housing developments that do not come with those kind of government imposed limits, I'm not exactly sure how they're ever guaranteeing that units are affordable for 15 years. In this case, I would say that this would be a great way to get more PHPs, priority housing projects, if they sign up for a 30-year loan. But could they repay that after 10 years? Yes. And what would happen then? Because they already bypassed Act 250. And that's probably a question for,
Wait, can you back up? What's Act 250 to do with it?
priority housing projects are a way to bypass Act 250.
Oh, right, so
And
they
that's
only
where the
apply in certain
language.
areas. Got it.
So therefore, you can be a priority housing project and not have to go through Act 250. That's why you would be a priority housing project. Priority housing projects come with no money, though. You do get some regulatory relief of not having to go through Act 250, but you don't get subsidy. And that's why the bar has to be somewhat low for what we require to be a priority housing project, because it's not like they're getting the benefit of a program like this. They're not getting money. And so that's why it's a mixed income program where, only 20% of the units have to be affordable at certain levels. It's because the only benefit of a PHP status is that you didn't have to go through Act 250.
And is there anything about that that's mutually exclusive with this program?
No, I think that this would be a way that developments could become a priority housing project, is they could say, I'm getting this rental RLF program. I'm signing up for a 30-year loan. My rents are going to be affordable to these. I'm going to set my rents at affordable to 80% AMI. And, it's going to be more than 15 years. So they should qualify. What happens if they repay that loan early is what I can't answer because I don't administer that priority housing piece. I also want to point out that not all of these rental RLFs would qualify, because a PHP only goes up to 80% of median for rentals, goes up to 120% for ownership units, but 80%. And as you can see, we let it go above. So they'd have to be in that lower tier of, they'd have to identify enough homes in that lower tier.
I see.
And I feel like I'm using a lot of words and I'm maybe
No,
not
that's
still
okay.
being
No, I see
clear,
what you're
but
saying. Yeah, it's, so they don't map super neatly onto each other.
that's a much more succinct way of saying what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Representative Labonte.
Okay, so let's say I get the loan for 30 years for 6%. 15 years goes by. Can I I'm not paying it off, but can I refinance it for like 3% for the next 15 years?
Well, a conventional loan is in the 6% right now. This program, we're looking at having it be between 0 and 3%. So even in the past very low rate environment, interest rates for commercial loans were not much lower than 3%. And so I don't see someone probably needing to refinance. But no, if you refinance, you wouldn't do it through this program. You pay off this loan and you go get a conventional loan and
Okay.
you'd stop participating in this program. Yeah, but if you have some kind of contribution from an employer or municipality, you'd have a 0% loan. So you really aren't going to refi unless.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you stay on that slide
Sorry.
for half a second? No, not that one.
Oh,
That one. You have language in there that I just want to talk about for a minute. You have rent caps of 3% a year as part of the program, so rent caps they're not voluntary if you're part of this program. You are allowed to raise it, but only to 3% a year, which may, in the case of 2022, be less than half of the rate of inflation. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
The question that I have ongoing is when I see a line like loan from bank based on rents, 55%. A program like this, especially as we discussed it last year, struck me as being a failure of the market. Failure of the bank to take risk, because that's what they're doing when they're giving a mortgage, a building loan, or what have you. Why? If they have based on rents, what is the mathematics, or is it algebra, or is it trigonometry that says if I'm building 20 units and I'm a known builder and it costs this much to build. We know it costs this much to build, and this is how much we have to rent for it. It can be expensive. It can be whatever it is. But from your perspective, and I know that you don't loan to everybody, but why is there such a gap between what a developer can expect from a bank, what their investment is, the developer equity? I get that. What's going on here? Why does the government need to invest this way to try to promote building when in the past the private market has been sufficient for private market apartments and completely different for what we call affordable housing?
Mm-hmm. Not everyone needs this program. So I would say that there is some building that's happening in the state where you don't need this because you're an established builder with probably decades of experience. There's a lot, it's often a family business. And so you are tapping into that. You have the equity to put in and you have the track record, you're lower risk. And if you charge very high rents, you may not have a gap. I'm aware of one development in Burlington right now that's still under construction that last I heard, studio apartments, when it's done, are going to go for $1,900 a month. That's a studio, not a one bedroom.
This is Manhattan Village in East Cupcake.
And so for established builders with long track records, long-standing relationships with banks, and who are comfortable and see a market in charging very high rents, there's some building happening. This program is designed for smaller builders like you heard from Peter Kahn, who was not interested in charging the maximum rents because he didn't want to see his community and maybe wasn't sure if the market in Middlebury Virgins could withstand that level of rents. And so $1,900 for a studio is not possible in every corner of Vermont. There's also builders who do not want to charge top dollar and they're looking to house households at rents that are lower. There's also, I know of other builders in Lamoille County where they're more starting out. They don't have decades of track record experience. And so that's a market failure. You know, they want to do this kind of development, but they don't have decades of experience to look to. And so I do think that it's a different cause and effect that leads to the need for this program. It often has to do with small size, small developments are more risky, length of time in the industry, as well as how high you want the ultimate rents to be. We're trying to encourage some units to be at lower rents. And then you start really getting into this gap because the bank will look at the rents you're going to charge. And if the rents you're going to charge are at the lower end, because you're trying to set aside these units, they won't approve you for as much of a loan.
And this is a whole different way of going about it than, well, I'm sorry, maybe it's not a whole different way, but in years past, in some of the older ways that we tried to, there's one down on Berry Street in down Street Owens where it's 16 units are market rate and 4 are affordable. But that was a zoning issue. That was in order to get the permits to build or fund the project. And this is different though. This is if you want to invest in if you want to participate in this program, you're going to say, oh, I can take a loan out of $150,000 a unit because I'm going to do 5 units at this price. So this is more voluntary to the builder rather than part of a permit, though it could include.
Exactly. We're seeing more and more inclusionary zoning where they're looking to, communities are looking to have more affordable units. And so this could be a way that now a developer could use this program to hit that inclusionary zoning. And while this is a new program for Vermont, this is not a new program. I often will talk about the national network I'm a part of, talking with all the other state housing agencies in the country. And this does exist in other states and has been successful. And so I'd love for VHFA to get all the credit for the brilliance of this, but honestly, we're stealing off other people's papers and have looked at what's been successful in Kansas, Massachusetts, Colorado, and probably some other states, and are replicating things that are being done in other places or getting launched right now in other places.
Your rent caps are 3% per year. Could it be like, I don't raise the rent at all for 1 year, then the next year jump up to 6? No, you can't accumulate, if you will. Okay.
That's just a concept that it does not exist in the private market. There are no rent caps. In the private market, I think the nonprofit housing that we fund does. I mean, does Champlain Housing Trust, do they have the right to raise the rent?
Up to, if the income limits that HUD calculates every year go up, then they could theoretically raise rents by however much that income limit went up. This last year, income limits went up a very high amount. And so theoretically, depending on the program, but I know the tax credit program, you could raise rents far greater. Nationally, the income limits went up over 10%. And so we saw in many parts of the country, real rent shock, and a lot of elders especially were facing displacement as a result. We did not see that in Vermont in the same way, but there's not the same kind of rent caps, but we are limited by what the HUD medians are.
And that's that's entry though. I mean, we took testimony from Down Street that said, for instance, in the South Main Street apartments, you get that apartment based on what your application is and where you are in the moment of application. You could stay there forever.
You could stay there, if it's tax credits, you could stay there until your income's at 140% of median.
Right.
And then, it kicks into but once you get over the tax credit limits, you start getting into the next available unit rule, which means maybe my income, I'm lucky enough, it's usually a marriage or something. It's not because someone's income is going up that much, but it's multiple adults in a household. Maybe my household income is now above some threshold. And then the next available unit that comes up, that one becomes the tax credit unit. And I am not displaced. It's a brilliant design to the program.
Right, but do you become a market priced apartment then? Representative Elder?
When we were talking about the missing middle program to purchase, the program that's ending, other than the $9 million you've got to disperse, you're saying that that's mostly going to be smaller units, maybe like 4 units or less. I'm just
An average of 1,500 square feet based on our applications.
Yeah. So for this program, different program, would you be able to characterize are there certain economies of scale at play here? So you would expect this program to get utilized by people doing significantly larger developments? Do you think that you would see, duplexes, triplexes, 4 units in this program as well?
It's possible. We designed it with a 10-unit model in mind. We actually were trying to design it for how small can we go. And we've talked with builders who have 6 and 8 unit properties that they're planning for, and had them pencil this out and put it into their pro forma to see, would this work for you with that size? And so far we're hearing all good things. And so how big could this go? I don't know. We're limited to the 35%. The language that was in S100 talked about geographic diversity and actually wanting to see this serving underserved communities. So I think that we would likely write up the program guide to not want to see this all invested in 1 or 2 developments, but to really spread it around and try to get as many communities as we can served through this. But could this be duplexes and things? I see no reason why not, although let's remember that those are more expensive builds. It's cheaper when you have a multifamily building and you just have one roof to maintain and repair. One set of 4 walls make that much siding as opposed to 4 times however many units is a lot more siding to buy and things like that.
All right, let's,
I have one last program. I just want to make sure,
we need to send,
Listening, he's on call.
oh, okay.
I'm going to be very fast because this is the last program you all funded last year with $1 million. This is something that came out of this committee, which is why I want to make sure I had time for it. The First Generation Homebuyer Program, it's a grant program that this committee specifically was looking to address the racial homeownership gap. You can see the chart on the slide that 72% of white households in Vermont own their home and only 24% of Black households in Vermont own their home. That orange bar says 18%. That is not what's going on in Vermont. That is actually the US national average would be 42% of Black households own their home. We are not even at the US average. And so we just have such a tremendous gap that this committee last year was looking for ways to lower barriers to homeownership for these households and increase homeownership. And so we had looked nationally at a congressional bill that was promoting first generation home buyers. That is not a race-based program. A first generation buyer means that the parents don't own a home. And we stole the language from the congressional bill and used that. And you all gave $1 million to BHFA. We put it with our down payment assistance program that's been in effect since 2015. But that program loans out money that gets repaid when a buyer refinances or sells their home. This is a straight old grant. And so you can get up to $15,000 through this. We spent a lot of time doing outreach and engagement with BIPOC-led organizations. And so we could have launched this program in June of last year in time for the home buying season. But because we were instructed through the legislation to do some meaningful engagement, we went through that process and then launched the program in early November. And it started with 10 pilot lenders. We work with more lenders than 10, but we chose these 10 to be geographically diverse, make sure we're covering the whole state. It has spurred private investment by those banks. The Vermont Federal Credit Union is, we would give $15,000 grant to a first generation buyer. They're putting $1,000 of their own money every time one of these closes so that household's getting $16,000. NEFCU is also making their own contribution, a charitable contribution every time they close one of these loans. And so it's public investment that's spurring private investment. You can combine this with our regular 0% down payment loan. And because we launched at the worst time of year in the home buying process, November, these numbers are not going to blow you out of the water that we've closed on 5 of them. We have 16 in process. But what I'm trying to signal is that we are not going to get through another fiscal year and still have this program open. In fact, we have lenders who want to participate in this, and we don't really want to open it up to new lenders because we think there's so much in process. We would only open this up to more lenders if there was another infusion of funding. S100 did include $1 million for this so that we could continue this program ideally through now our peak season, which is the next 4 or 5 months. And we think that with that, we could come back in January and talk about the racial breakdown of the people served, where they were, and how much, what their incomes were and their assets and things like that. But at this point, I wouldn't want to report on the success of this program based on the 5 loan closings that we've had so far. One change that S100 did contemplate was that Rhode Island and Maine and New Hampshire, other states are now following the lead and rolling out first gen programs themselves. And I have a whole memo that I'm not going to bore you with now about why we should look to change the definition. I'm sure there's some questions about why we need this language change, but I also want to be respectful of your time. I know you have the state auditor waiting, and I don't know if you want to get into that level of nuance at this point, because for all I know, you're not even going to support this program. And so I don't know if you want to know about how I changed the program. So you tell me what to talk about.
No, I think it's important because I just want to point out, the point of appreciation is that while the work that you did on this, once it was approved, you started off with a series of bullet points in terms of what the program could be or how you were going to do outreach. And I believe what you told me last fall was that the learning process was, there was a timeout put on because you had to just rethink perhaps the constitutionality of what we were asking for on the race-based or discrimination-based loaning, to come up with a program that worked with everybody. You worked with the stakeholders in order to redefine what the program was from what we passed. So, which I totally appreciate.
Well, I just want to say, not exactly, just because I think that some of that is, I think, what's been going on with the Land Access and Opportunity Board. This program you passed as a first gen, there was no racial component to it. I know what you're thinking of. What we learned through the process was that when we went out to organizations and asked for partnership with this, for one, they were very overwhelmed by how many pieces of legislation were asking for their input and engagement and involvement. And for two, we heard back that down payment assistance is but one barrier to homeownership, and that it is a multitude of systemic issues that need to be addressed. And so we need to sit with that uncomfortability for a while, because we were showing up to the table with just this one tool to address. And I think folks want to have a much bigger conversation. And so with that, we were able to launch the program and get a lot of support for it. And in addition, we are now continuing that conversation. For instance, that's where the financial literacy partnership came from, that we now have a woman of color who we're now sponsoring to go around, because that was a piece that they said, that's what we need is financial literacy. We've also heard that we need to look at the appraisal process, realtors and lenders, and just make sure that we're doing soft handoffs and communicating well along the entire home buying process. And so that is what VHFA is looking forward to doing over the next several years, but that is not a quick fix to combat these kinds of numbers that I have on this chart. So it did take a while, and it is a continual learning process.
But in this particular case here, the difference between first-time home buyer and, so we had I don't want to say convoluted, but there was a convoluted, parents couldn't have had a home for the previous 3 years or what have you. And now, so what are you proposing to change?
And so where we landed was, or you all landed, was that parents don't currently own a home. And I will say, my own personal experience is that is flawed. My parents owned a home my entire life, but they have both deceased. And so they don't currently own a home. And so if I were a first-time home buyer, I would qualify for this, and I should not, because they both deceased. And actually there was a little bit of an inheritance. And so I'm not the target market here. And so instead what we're talking about is to have an attestation that the parents never owned a home. And that was what I think the intention was not that the parents don't currently own a home, because what if they owned a home for many years, they happen to have sold it, and now they're living in rental or something else. And then, so it's really to attest that they've never owned a home. One thing that I think, if I were you and even myself, I had some trouble with, is that we're talking about one borrower. And when you have multiple adults, a couple relationship, people would say, well, shouldn't all the borrowers have to attest to this? This is, we are still recommending that we go with one borrower, because we see how this is playing out with our lenders and with the marketplace. And we just can't explain to people that all the borrowers have to qualify, because that's not how people think and are reacting to this. And there's just been a lot of education in that regard, where they're like, well, I am a first gen borrower. Why is this case? So we are adopting what we've learned. The Rhode Island was ahead of the curve in this and had a longer program. And this seems to be the model and the definition that more and more states are adopting, and I think is going to become the the bigger trend. There is also federal legislation to support a program like this with federal resources. So we're also continuing to pay attention to what they're doing so that we're always as matched up as we can be.
Great.
I'm done. I'm sorry if
No, we're not. I think it's important to, I mean, we have very limited time to deal with this, and we know that there was a real learning process, a real learning process for us on this bill.
Well, and it's very confusing because what I just explained to you was both the last year's budget, this year's budget, the BAA, S100, which is not in any budget at the moment. We're in limbo right here. So I would be happy to continue to come back and speak to this, but I would love your support for all of these programs because I think that there's value to all of them to hit different parts of the market. Yeah.
Can I clarify that last one? Don't we have, I know that the Senate has pulled the appropriations
For all three programs.
for all three programs from, what did they pull it from? The budget we sent them?
Nope, the budget you sent them had none of these three
So
programs.
it had none of these in it.
None of them.
We haven't put it in
Nope.
there at all.
And so it was in S100 and they pulled it out of that. So
they
this
pulled it out
doesn't
of-
exist anywhere. I
Right.
just will say that the rental RLF only was in the governor's budget. So some would say, I mean, is the Senate starting from the House budget of which it doesn't exist? Or are they starting with the governor's budget? And I don't know how they look at this, but.
We'll figure that out. I think it's the first thing that's important is to deal with the policy, make sure the policy is right. And then over the next month, we'll figure out the budgetary pieces of it in the back and forth between the House and Senate.
And so if you look at the S100 language, which had the policy language, that's where the 120, 150% AMI caps, things like that. I would be happy to come back or tell you about where some of the thinking came from any of those pieces.
Okay, yeah.
This business of not in last year's or not in this year's, in last year's, wind up in a program being funded for a year, especially if we're talking about one-time money. Seems like an awful lot of effort to set up a program, set up and administer a program for 1 year and then set up and administer a different program the next year. Does it make more sense to continue funding existing programs and tweak eligibility than to stand up new programs?
Yep. So I would say the rental RLF, it's a revolving loan fund. So I think that's why the governor was, I've heard him say, interested in that program is that could be a legacy program. You could invest 20 million at one-time dollars and that would live on. And so investing in the administration and the setup and all that is worth it because it's actually that'll be something we can look at years from now and say that still is helping Vermont because as we get loan payments in, we can loan it back out. So we get over that issue there. The first generation, I would say it's worth it because I feel like we're just getting going. And I thought $1 million was enough, but it's taken a little while to get going. And so I'd love to keep the program going through a home buying season to see what the outcomes are before we could really assess it. And the missing mill home ownership, I don't know, that one's already built because we did run it last year. And so why not give it more money and we'll just keep the machine on? But you're right. It is, you do get a little motion sickness with the start and stopping of gas and brake.
One other thing, so I was all excited about the revolving loan fund until I kind of played out very, very roughly the math of, okay, so if you loan out 20 million in 30-year loans, maybe you get some of that back in 20 years, so the program's kind of dormant for.
Could be, but I work in interest rates and I do not think that is going to be the case. I think we'll get prepayments. I think we'll get some churn to the whole thing. Maybe not, but you're right. If interest rates continue to climb for the next 30 years, then you're right. That is a risk of the program. Yep, it could be a one-time shot in that regard.
Because you would need people to refinance at lower rates to free up capital.
Yes, and I don't think that all of these loans are going to be at 0%. I'm not modeling that. I
Right.
think a lot of them, they're not going to get that employer investment or municipal investment, and so they might be at 3%. I also think that if rates drop a little bit, that some developers may not want to keep the affordability restrictions, may not want to keep dealing with the oversight of VHFA and the rent caps. And so I think there will be other things that may spur a change in who's participating in the program. And each time that changes, we're able to build more housing. But you are not wrong that we could put 20 million out there and, at 125,000 a unit, I have to quickly do the math, and then it's 100 something units, and then maybe nothing happens. But there's 100 households for the next few.
Because the debt service payments that are gonna be coming in aren't gonna be probably significant enough to
Right.
loan out again.
Right.
You're gonna need,
All right, thank you, Maura.
Thank you very much.
And this particular conversation is a fabulous segue into having the auditor here. Auditor Hoffer, how are you?
Okay, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you for your patience. You're free to come inside. It looks like you're just sitting out on the porch of the.
Standing in the street.
And here really on the steps of DMV, the special security camera at DMV. So may I just refer to you as Doug today or?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Doug, this is the first time I've seen the auditor of accounts in a bill, especially a housing bill, that is requesting that you put together a plan to do some auditing of some of the housing money that is being expended, and we have expended quite a bit of money. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on first of all, is this a program that is approved by you? And is this how you usually do an audit when you're interested in the performance of tax dollars? And what exactly, how exactly does that work? What are your, if this is
Yes,
approved
no,
by
I don't
the
know.
auditor, then how does this work? What should we expect from not just this legislation, but from an audit of the monies that have been expended?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. Second, I did not ask for this provision. This was a request by Senator Brock, who did speak with me and my deputy about it. I told him it was premature and for a number of reasons problematic, but that I wasn't going to stand in the way if everybody thought it was a great idea. I think it has merit, but there are a lot of problems, and I'll explain why. First of all, I have not been following S100. I have my own stuff to pay attention to. Obviously, it's gotten quite a bit of coverage. It's a big deal. I am a big supporter of affordable housing, and when I worked at City Hall in the late 80s and early 90s in Burlington, we did some great work, including inclusionary zoning, which is still paying benefits. So, and I know Maura, and I always learn from Maura and her colleagues, but I can't say that I know S100 enough to know or to say, to give you my opinion of it. I'll just say that I appreciate and support virtually all efforts for more affordable housing. As for audits generally, for those of you who don't know me or our work, as a rule, when we set out to do a job and I select a broad topic, we have to narrow the objectives to something that's manageable, first of all, or you end up with scope creep and it takes 2 years, and that's a problem. Furthermore, the nature of performance auditing is that you have to have criteria. If you say, I want to determine the effectiveness and the performance of a particular program, you have to measure it against something. You can't just say, is this a good thing? Well, how do you define good in the context of any particular program? In this case, the scope could be enormous as written. Now, Randy didn't say just do everything because he knows better. He was an auditor, is an auditor. But this bill covers so much ground that the scope would be, first of all, there's a timing issue. The bill asks for a plan by January of 24. But even then, even if you adopt this and most of it becomes law, you're talking about changes at the state level, changes at the municipal level, and a bunch of variables, which I'll get to in a minute. And I don't think it will have been in effect long enough to have anywhere near enough information to do a job that's of any value to you. Because it's not just, there's not going to be a lot of activity from day one This is dependent on outside actors, developers, banks, and so forth, who all have to come together and make projects happen and get permits before there's anything we could do. Furthermore, the scope includes multiple jurisdictions. We can't just say, how's it working? It's state, it's municipalities. And once you throw in municipalities, I suppose we could do a sample and just live with those choices, whichever municipalities were selected. But is that going to be representative? I don't know. That would be up to us to do the best we could. But once you start talking about 4 to 6 or more municipalities, you get into trouble in terms of how long it takes to get information. And furthermore, how much activity has occurred, that would be part of our selection process, in those municipalities to warrant the work being done one day versus a year later. That's a complication for sure. And they will respond differently, as I said. And the variables are significant, as you guys know better than I. There's home ownership impacts versus rental. There's affordable versus market rate. There's for-profit versus nonprofit developers. There's urban versus rural. There's downtown versus elsewhere. There's a lot here. And that's just the nature of housing, and it's wonderful. And I certainly hope if the legislature proceeds with this, that it produces quantifiable results. But as an audit topic, it's a little scary. So I'm not going to say no, but I'm not excited about it the way it's written at all. I think it's premature. So that's really all I can say for today.
So the line here on line 11, whatever page I'm on, but just the idea is a performance audit of the residential housing development and approval process. That makes it sound so much simpler, as you said, than it really is. How do you audit an approval process for the development of nonprofit or for-profit housing? I mean, I just don't. You have to look and are there enough loans available? Are there enough permits available? Are there enough? And I'm assuming that that's, again, if we're making changes to zoning, possibly Act 250, you have nothing. What I hear you saying is that you have nothing to work with yet.
No, it's premature and it's too big. Even if we were to ask you to authorize this and provide the resources, we might need some outside help, although I doubt it. We would have to narrow this dramatically. So for those of you who are interested, and I assume that's all of you, in how this might play out, if you approve it and the whole legislature approves it, we can't answer all the questions that you're going to have. No way. Now, admittedly, I think there are people who, are longtime players in the system. Some of them I know, Maura and Michael Monti at CHT and all the major players, no doubt, although they all have their own agendas. I think they're mostly in the public interest, but they are able to report to you on their experience with the current system and a modified system. I don't know that you need a GAGAS audit to do that. The banks report information, and no doubt if invited in by you guys would provide information, VITA and so forth. Everybody who's in the system, to some extent, is motivated to share information with you if it's in their interest. And even the ones who aren't pleased with the changes you made, they'll come in. That you might get a biased view, but nevertheless, this doesn't feel like an easy lift for my office. And I'm not afraid of heavy lifts, but this one's just too big and uncertain. Don't all speak at once.
We're a very polite bunch here. Doug.
So Doug, Robin, Chestnut Tangerine here. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
And I'm wondering, is there, in the realm of public financing of housing, is there an area, a niche that is of particular interest to you, or you haven't looked at it with that?
No, I had the good fortune to work with some exceptional people in Burlington in the 80s and 90s, some of whom are still working and aren't retired. I think inclusionary zoning is brilliant, and it's achieved a great deal. But not just that method of achieving the same outcome, but I think the old, what we used to call the land trust model, shared equity is a brilliant solution and works very, very well. And I don't usually hear the governor talk about that, but I'm a big believer in if you're going to make it affordable at the outset, then plan ahead, because that family, when they sell it, wants to take their equity with them, and who can blame them? But if there's public money in there, why shouldn't it be affordable in perpetuity? That's my bias. That's my personal bias. It's nothing to do with me being state auditor.
And that's the program. It's, the move away from shared equity is, it's just been part of the affordable housing culture for the last 25 years of what's possible. And shared equity is harder, and it's just harder than building multi-units. I think federal and state law has really emphasized state has multi-unit, and we have needs. We have, the thought of building 40,000 homes as opposed to 40,000 units, if that's the real number, is overwhelming. Where would you put them?
Well, I think the shared equity can work for condos as well as single family homes. No problem there. Obviously, it's different for rental, but I don't think the nature of the housing unit limits the use of the shared equity model. I could be wrong. In any case, we need a lot of rental units as well. There's a lot going on.
So, we should probably reach out to Senator Brock to see what his thinking is, but I appreciate you filling us in. I'm not sure, do we have any further questions for the auditor at this time on this? You've shared your thoughts very clearly, and I appreciate that.
What page is it on?
What's that?
What page is it?
I am on page 46.
Oh,
Section 43.
I think section 43 is the last item before the end of the bill.
Which makes sense if it was added on at the last minute, so.
Shocking, yeah.
All right, no, I appreciate this. I mean, I know that when I saw that when it came up through the walkthrough, I've always assumed that the auditor's office is, I've just never experienced a legislative directive to the auditor of accounts as a separate constitutional office to do a study.
Well, there was one, which I'm paying for every day of my life, and that is TIF. So thank you very much. That was my first unfunded mandate. Thank you.
I guess our pleasure. Didn't come out of our committee, but I'm sure we voted for it. So, no, is there any further questions for Doug?
I just want to say I particularly appreciated that audit.
All right. Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care.
And we'll, if we have further questions, we'll be in touch.
I'll be around. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, please. Let's take till 3:15, please.